And I remember I saw Wicked before it went on Broadway when it was in San Francisco, when they were workshopping it.
Somehow you beat me there too. Wow, all these origin stories. You're like, crushing this chat.
Hi.
Hey.
John.
Shawn.
It's the first time we met.
It is the first time we met, but I'm instantly comfortable because I thought I was a nerd for pre-thinking about things I wanted to ask you about.
Yes.
But you actually out-nerded me with paper notes, hard copy notes.
I think it's called insecurity. I was like, oh no, I can't go into not know what to say.
But also, are you a bit, I know I'm a bit of a nerd for prep when I make a movie.
Yes.
Are you that way when you make a movie?
Absolutely. I prep.
Yeah.
But on the day, I try to let the movie speak to me.
And that
feels like what you're
I mean, that's, don't you find, I don't know, you've made like, how many movies you made? Like 7?
This will be my 10th movie.
Okay, and I think I've made 15 or something.
Yeah, that's nuts.
And I have found exactly what you said, which is I need to prep so I can sleep the night before I go to shoot. But if I've prepped, I can be loose on the day.
You know, we've crossed paths. Well, I don't know if we've actually crossed paths, but we've crossed worlds many years ago on The Secret World of Alex Mack.
How did we cross paths there? And how are you going that old school? Were you alive?
I was an extra one summer. My friend was Larissa Olenek.
Yes.
And she went to my high school, and I wanted to get into movies, and the only way you can is to see it was go be an extra. So I went on set that summer.
This is
crazy. It was the best experience, and there I am right behind her.
This is crazy. Please, someone zoom in.
I don't get to talk about this ever.
Wow.
So there I am. I don't know what the camera
that is.
But,
unbelievable.
There it is, right there.
Yeah, for people who are maybe under 30 and watching this, there was this Nickelodeon show called The Secret World of Alex Mack. That was my first gig out of film school. I went to USC grad school, you went undergrad.
Yes.
And I got a half-hour episode of Nickelodeon for Alex Mack. And I remember, it's funny, we were talking about prep before because I was so like, I need my shot list. I gotta have my shot list. I gotta know what the shots are. And I now look back at it and realize, I was so locked into the plan that maybe I wasn't as open as I've since become to a better idea surprising me. And in fact, now I go to work hoping that a better idea, a better moment of performance, a better angle, et cetera, that surprises me. But wow, I guess our paths did cross.
I never get to talk to people about that experience, so it's really fun.
Well, do you know that experience was, I remember it was Larissa's first kiss.
Oh yes.
And it was in the show. And I remember being like, do you rehearse it? Is that like, how does this work? And then I ended up getting a DGA award nomination for that, for like children's television. And I remember thinking like, oh wow, and all the dreams coming true. And then of course you realize, oh no, it's, you know what, there's no straight lines in these careers. It's kind of ebbs and flows and takes you to surprising places you don't expect.
But that's why I like talking. I don't have a lot of like director friends to talk about like, and even if I do, I don't talk about like how we process the stuff and how we do it in our journey. So it's really nice.
Well, I mean, speaking of, just since you've given me such a beautiful,
sorry about that.
We're going to follow an unexpected idea. Thinking of origins and early chapters, what did you expect your career to be? And how is that borne out or now divergent in the career you've got?
Well, I grew up loving movies. I grew up in a Chinese restaurant in the Bay Area. People have a different perspective of what a director is. Like I thought, oh, you're directing. I was look at behind the scenes footage of Hook and see Spielberg on there and kids are jumping in the water. I'm like, oh yeah, I want to play all day like that. And I did like wedding videos growing up and bar mitzvah videos and just like forcing my friends to be in my videos. And so I think in a weird way, going to USC, I learned that it wasn't like a craft school. It wasn't like, hey, here's how you use the tools. It was like, how do you become emotionally available for your stories to come out of that?
You learned that in film school? Because I'll tell you, I not to be insulting to USC, that was an incredible experience for me too. But I had I had been a theater major at Yale, and so I had always been around theater and dramaturgy and actors and performance, and I came and I found USC to be really helpful in giving me technical knowledge.
Oh, interesting.
But for you, it sounds like it also gave you emotional knowledge and that realization.
It could have been different too because it was undergrad and grad, which may be a different thing. Like I was coming in, first time living on my own, didn't know who I was, who my friends would be. And so I was also finding like just what
Yes.
I thought about the world, and a lot was being revealed to me at that time.
And was there, I remember hearing, was Spielberg an early like supporter of yours? Did you have a moment, like I was a bit describing with my Alex Mack episode, where you're like, I've arrived, the dreams are coming true, and then you're like, oh wait, where'd the dreams go? What's happening? It's
that
not.
totally happened.
So tell me, how did you and Steven cross paths?
So I was at SC and I was doing my thesis film, and I recruited this woman who was a semester older than me, Alice Brooks, to actually shoot my first musical. We shot it over the summer and I graduated, and that short film is somehow, some way, this is before YouTube, before anything could go online, this was on VHS tape or DVD, got to Spielberg's desk and I got that phone call, that crazy phone call that said, I want to meet. And I love musicals, so it was crazy. And so I got to meet with him, and he let me.
You're what, 23?
Yeah,
20?
I was 22. I was 22 years old.
Wow.
And come to the set. So I came to sit with him at set and watch him direct. And we actually set up a script that me and my friends were working on at DreamWorks at the time. My first pitch was with Steven, with Adam Goodman, who was there at the time, Mike DeLuca, who was there at the time, and Walter and Laurie. So that was my first pitch
Power
ever.
room. And that's a power room before you even realized how scary a room that was.
And my pitch was crazy. It was like Moulin Rouge. We brought in a chest and we had wigs and hats and acted out the whole thing and images, but they bought it. And but I didn't make my first movie till 5 years later. And I think it's like that initial thing of like, oh, I made it is really hard because you won the lottery. I didn't earn it. I didn't make an independent film. I didn't work on commercials. I didn't make music video. I had no context. And so I went in there kind of freaked out. I couldn't get the movie actually made. For years, I think it was about like, do I even deserve to be here? And those first movies actually that I got did Step Up to the Streets, which was supposed to be a direct-to-DVD movie.
Was that the sequel to Step Up or the sequel to the sequel?
No, that was the sequel to Step Up.
Okay.
But at that time, it was like, I got to take something. And that was sort of the start into my studio movie world.
Elphaba. You can room with Miss Galinda.
What?
Having just seen Wicked and loved it, and I say that with the very high bar of being a crazy, like I could blame it on the fact that I have 4 daughters, but the truth is I'm just a nerd for musicals and an extra huge nerd for Wicked. I've seen that show over a dozen times and I think the movie's incredible, but that theme that you just articulated of do I deserve to be here is Elphaba at Shiz. And I'm wondering were you conscious of that movie, which predated both of us, right? That show has lived and flourished for over a decade. Were you conscious that it was expressing things that are in you?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I watch Deadpool and Wolverine, I feel that same thing with Wolverine. Why does this Logan deserve to be here? Why is this the Logan? I love that. I've heard you say that in the past, and I think that's something that's very universal. I think that's something, and I remember I saw Wicked before it went on Broadway when it was in San Francisco, when they were workshopping it.
Somehow you beat me there too. Wow, all these origin stories. You're crushing this chat.
I was like patient zero, I felt like, because I knew nothing about it.
Because I saw it on Broadway with Kristen
and Adina, but it was just
with that cast?
With that cast, yes.
Okay.
So that was crazy to watch because I knew nothing, and I was like, Wizard of Oz means so much to my parents who were immigrants who came here, the Yellow Brick Road, the wizard behind the curtain. This was the American dream. This was cinema. This was all those things. And I was going to USC at the time. So I flew back. My mom was like, we have tickets to the show. And we used to go to the show every weekend. Watching that blew my mind.
Your parents would take you to theater every weekend?
Yes.
Were you already super into musicals as a genre?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why Jon M. Chu, because I saw George M. or Yankee Doodle Dandy, and it was George M. Cohen, and I was like, my middle name, I was young, I was like, my middle name is M. I could just be called Jon M. So everything I'd sign at school was Jon M.
I literally wondered about the initial because I thought, wait, was there someone already in the DGA named Jon Chu? So the M was also inspired.
Yes,
Wow.
and it's on all the wedding videos that I did and all the bar mitzvahs. So when you get into the DGA, you have to like write down what your name is.
Yeah,
and I was
you're
gonna
committing.
go, Jonathan Chu, the proper name, or Chu, or but Jon M. Chu. That's what I always wanted to do. So that's funny. But yeah, I think Elphaba, that character, absolutely spoke to me in a weird way. Galinda as well. Like you want to be Elphaba. You want to see her burst into her power, and yet we're all sort of Glinda too. Like, are we ready when you know the truth? Are you ready to like pop your own bubble and face the uncomfortable stuff?
I mean, what I thought really came across, and I mean, a lot of things came across in your film, but this idea that Glinda wants to be special, but she doubts and questions whether she actually is.
Absolutely.
And I do feel, I mean, look, we meet a lot of creative people in our jobs, and I remember once, I think it was like Denzel Washington, I watched some interview where he's like, the dream doesn't make you special. It's what are you going to do after that? You know, Glinda goes there with that dream of studying, you know, magic and having those gifts, but deep down she questions whether she does. And I have found myself, I'm sure you have too, that with experience comes not only, you know, a facility with the tools, but a confidence that you, A, deserve to be here.
Yeah.
And that you actually have those abilities to support the dream that clearly we both started with.
When did you know you had those? Or
Wow.
when you started, how insecure were you?
I mean, I think, it's funny because I just last night finished shooting my last scene after a decade of Stranger Things.
Oh my
So I flew back late last night, and I've thought about that show that, you know, I've been a part of for all these years, and everyone talks about, you know, like they'll talk about with Wicked, the special effects and, you know, the songs and the choreography, but at its heart is the heart.
Yeah.
And with Stranger Things, that same thing of this is a group of people who really questioned their value, who find each other, and who find superpowers in connection. And so that idea has always been really compelling to me. From what I know about your background, I think you had it sounds like you had obviously a very specific story, but parents who were supportive and who never did anything but, I guess, nurture your sense of your own worth.
Yeah,
you know, I had a divorced household, an alcoholic mom, and it really was like, okay, I want to build ideas of the life I wish I was living.
Everybody knows me. I'm the Wolverine.
Yes, you are, and I'm gonna need you to come with me right now.
I see now a lot of the work I've done are aspirational and about this dream that the right connections, the right relationships, and this is really what Deadpool and Wolverine is about. That last line, for instance, which was one of the first lines I wrote, sometimes the people we save, they save us right back. I very much felt as a younger person that I was looking to be saved, and I ended up finding the right spouse when I was so young. I didn't even know how right.
How old were you?
I met her on my student film at USC.
It happens at USC on
it
student
all
films.
comes
What
out
are you
to
gonna do?
USC.
Yeah.
I was 24, and I was
Oh,
looking
wow.
for someone to produce my USC thesis film. And as we both know, producing a short is a fairly thankless job, because even in success, it's not like the producer gets a career the next day,
Yeah.
right? Directors, we do all right. We get, frankly, an
call from
outsized.
Spielberg sometimes,
Well,
but
yeah,
yeah.
right. Like if the glory comes, it comes inappropriately with tonnage to the filmmaker.
Yeah.
Producers less. But my wife, Serena, produced my student film. So I have never lived one day in this job as a filmmaker without sharing it with Serena. And it really is that feeling that, oh, I saved her from the wounds that she had early on, and she saved me. And I think that theme, which, by the way, I could be reductive and say Wicked is exploring the same thing. Elphaba and Glinda save each other.
Absolutely.
And by the way, it's one reason I'm excited for part 2, because I want to see what happens next,
yes.
even though I
yes,
know.
there you go. So when you started then, what was the first thing you actually...
So I came out of film school. I made a student film called Broken Record it was a coming of age story about two 13-year-olds living in a small town where nothing exciting ever happens. They get married to get into the Guinness Book of World Records. And this is in the mid-90s when every one of my classmates was making dark Tarantino derivations. And I made this funny, sweet, ultimately kind of warm-hearted romantic comedy with 13-year-olds. And it led to, it was not the cool choice at the time. And I remember many classmates saying, you know, how are you going to get work? Like, your stuff, like, this is pretty soft. And that word, it irked me for a long time, because I got Nickelodeon episodes, and it led to Disney Channel. and it led to my first movie, Big Fat Liar. And then I did like a decade plus as the family comedy guy.
Yep. Which were fantastic.
You know
and
what?
I
It was.
love those.
I'm not complaining,
yes,
right? It was like this. It led to Cheaper by the Dozen and the Night Museum movies. There were years where I was grateful for my success, but I really questioned whether I would ever get to tell the diverse kinds of tonalities and stories that I love as an audience member. And not to bring it back too kind of cloyingly to Spielberg, but in the midst of all those family comedies, Real Steel was really this revelatory experience, not only because Steven executive produced it and I got to spend time and really kind of just sit at the knee and drink in the experience and the wisdom, but that was my first glimmer of, oh wow, directing different kinds of films forces us as directors to use different muscles.
Yeah.
And I know if I look at your filmography, from the sequels that you did to Asians to the movie you did with Lynn, and now of course Wicked, it's not a straight line.
Yeah, no.
Right? And it maybe took you longer and a more circuitous path to what I assume is a pretty dream come true kind of moment.
Definitely.
People, we all come into this thinking, oh, that is my dream, I shall go there.
Yep.
And I think the people who really get messed up in their youth are the ones who think it's going to be linear.
Yep.
And it really is kind of the curves and the disappointments. I was going to ask you, by the way, this may be a weird question. What is a disappointment, whether creative or outcome? Is there a disappointment that comes to mind that taught you something important?
Well, one, I love what you're talking about, your journey, because I don't talk to a lot of directors about the psychology of being a director and what people expect you to know the answers or expect you to be. What kind of artist are you? And they put you in a category. And part of my self-conscious was I just wanted to be a director, not a Asian director or put me into any category. And so I love it when you were in this family film space, and that is an amazing space to be in, how much joy you put into this world, and yet you're still self-conscious about that and how maybe other filmmakers see that. I felt that in film school. I felt that I love to make joyful movies. That's the movies I grew up on. I love movies that take you to another place and that have love and not naive. And maybe at first in those movies that I made had a naivete to it. But you learn quickly about life coming to LA, trying to make it in the Hollywood business.
Yeah.
And so when I look at my movies and my journey, I often stop and think, how, film school specifically, are you not artsy enough if you're not talking about blood and guts and murder and whatever, like drugs? Your movies, Spielberg movies, Zemeckis movies, they were all sort of this light in the horizon to say, it's okay, you can put this into the universe, it's important. Ron Howard spoke at our graduation and he said, protect the optimism.
I remember on the first night at the museum, Chris Columbus, who was my producer. And Chris was the king of the family genre in the generation when I was coming up. And so I remember I sat down with him and I learned a lot about producing from Chris and later from Steven, both of whom really showed me that you gotta let the filmmaker have the space to breathe, and yet you have to be there to support and backstop, which is the part of producing I love. But Chris said two things, I don't know if they'll resonate for you. One was, when I was prepping the movie, I was freaked out because I had never done a visual effect. I was like, Pink Panther, Cheaper by the Dozen, I didn't know anything. And he said, your job right now isn't to know the how. You're going to be surrounded by people who know how. Your job is to be clear about the what. What do you want your movie to be? If you're specific and clear about that, people will support and figure out the how, and eventually you gain fluency, as I'm sure you have. But so the clarity of that and the kind of critical need to be decisive as a leader, as a filmmaker, that I learned early. I'm sure you have too. But the other one was after Night Museum hit big, I was like, now I'm gonna be edgy. I'm gonna do dark thrillers and noir horror and whatever the fuck. And I remember Chris said, why are you running from what you are? Why are you discounting this thing that you know how to do just because it comes naturally to you? And it took me many years to actually internalize that wisdom. And ever since I have, which really has been in the last kind of many years with Free Guy and Adam Project and Deadpool Wolverine, I feel that I'm not only doing work that I'm more gratified by, but I'm also enjoying my life a lot more.
That's so nice.
So I'm sure that
It's that
you've
value,
come to that too.
your value of your story. I remember, so when I was struggling of getting a movie made, and I didn't know where else to go, and everyone was already inviting me to speak at USC, and I hadn't even made my first movie. It's just because the trade said I was making a
What
movie.
were you doing once the Stephen musical failed
Yes.
to gel?
Yes.
What did you do? How did you make a living?
Yeah.
What did you do every day?
Well, at that time, I was pair play on a movie that never got made, Bye Bye Birdie, and so I can't even get pair play now. So at that time, there was a different era.
Oh, it was a
and there
different era. Yeah.
So that kept me afloat. I live off that much anyway.
Yeah.
It was fine. But I was developing a lot. I had like 3 projects at Warner Brothers, a project at Sony. Working a lot, but not making anything. It was the first time in my life, the longest period of time where I wasn't making anything, because even when I was growing up, I didn't have a job. I had my camera and I was editing and I was getting my friends together. When you get discovered by Spielberg and you get a job, you feel like, oh, I have to wait for that job to start.
Yes.
Not actually just do what you do. And I learned a lot because YouTube came around right at the end of that. And we started making these YouTube videos where we challenged Miley Cyrus to a dance battle or something, and it became this viral thing. I got to work with all these dancers, and I got to shoot these things, and I got to edit again. And the editing in my hands and shooting in my hands remind me why I love it. And when Step Up 2 came to my desk, it was direct-to-DVD, and I was like, oh, I don't do direct-to-DVD, what are you talking about? And I got discovered by Spielberg, I'm gonna go make a movie. And I talked to my mom, and she said, when did you become a snob? She said, if you're a storyteller, then you can tell a story in any medium. You could be at a campfire, you should be able to tell a story, let alone DVD or TV or anything.
Yes.
You haven't proven yourself. And it really adjusted my brain of like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm not a director, I'm a storyteller. And so my antennas went up of, I'm gonna make the best damn direct-to-DVD dance movie sequel of all time. And I redid the script, it got into a place, and then got the job, and then Disney, who had distributed the first movie, heard that I was attached to it, so they're like, oh, we want to hear that. The other one was Summit. So then we all went in, pitched it, and 20 minutes later, he greenlit the movie, Oren Aviv, to go get the movie released in 9 months, which we did. But it was that lesson of, you are a storyteller first. And that's every part of your job as a director.
Yeah.
Talking to crew, talking to actors, talking to things. It's not just the movie, the end movie. It's in everything you do, you're telling a story.
But I feel like there's something else. And again, who knows who watches these things? I'm sure it's our colleagues, but presumably it's younger you, younger me, people aspiring to this.
Yeah.
Because the other theme in that anecdote, which really resonates for me, is whatever you're doing, man, do it as exceptionally as you can, because you never know the thing that's going to change everything.
Absolutely.
And for me, I told you I was doing Nickelodeon and Disney Channel shows. One of those series was a show that no one's heard about called Cousin Skeeter. And it was about this black family who's the cousin of which lives with them. But the thing is, the cousin is a puppet. And no one acknowledges that it's a puppet. So it's basically a family sitcom with a puppet. But I was like, I'm gonna make this the best puppet show ever. I'm gonna do tracking shots. Let's cut holes in the puppeteers kind of where they would work underneath. Let's cut these trenches so I could track with Skeeter. And I did. I was one of like 62 episodes. I went on with my life. 4 years later, I get a call. It's Brian Robbins. And he goes, and he was the producer of Cousin Skeeter. And I'll never forget it. He goes, you know the call? I'm like, what call? He goes, the call you've been waiting for? This is that call. Because we remember that one episode of Cousin Skeeter, and we have this movie called Big Fat Liar at Universal. Are you ready to make a movie?
Wow.
And I got it because of Skeeter and this delusional belief that I had to find a way to make it great. Just like you took a direct-to-DVD step-up sequel, and you were goddamn committed to making it great.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
a few years later, here we are, so you never know.
But that's what I love about filmmaking, that, you know, some directors have they have the vision of the movie itself and or the dream movie to make one day. I don't know how you are, but for me, I fell in love with filmmaking because it was a process that I, as a kid, I didn't know how to express myself in that. But gathering people, having the idea, telling them the idea, having it all come together. To me, the process is the thing I fell in love with. So the genre in which I was making, whether it was a dance movie, which I loved, going into a new world which I did not know. People think oh, you're a dancer, Jon. You started as a dancer. I'm like, no, I'm a terrible dancer.
So you had a love of musicals as a form.
Yes.
And
yes.
that was
and
the
friends
degree.
who were dancers and people in theater. It's the only way in, really.
Yep.
And they were the only ones who would help me when I was shooting a movie. So they were the only ones who were there. So I learned a lot about how to use my camera to help them tell their stories. But that process was always everything.
Well, I asked you earlier about disappointment, which, I mean, if you have any kind of duration.
Oh, yes. I didn't even answer your question.
No, I trust me, I'm to blame for the wildly meandering conversation, but I'm enjoying it too much. I know, I mean, you've had movies that have been huge hits, and you've had movies that weren't, as have I. And I remember when you have a movie that misses, you finally realize, oh, I don't control outcome. It's easy to forget when you make hits.
Yeah.
When you make hits, it's like, oh yeah, life is fair.
Yeah.
Outcomes are just. And then I've made a couple of movies that missed, and it's shattering.
Yes.
And suddenly the public aspect of these jobs that are fun most of the time become very not fun, because there's a embarrassment factor, there's public disappointment. But once I learned that I don't control outcome, I started savoring process.
Yes.
And it's really what you're saying. For me, give me a set where I have my actors, my camera department, my art department, my boom operator, and we're gonna tell a story. Okay, guys, huddle up. Here's what we're gonna do. And again, going back to that Chris Columbus advice, I don't know how to do all their jobs as well as them. I don't presume to. But my job is to be clear and to inspire hundreds of artists on these big movies. It's hundreds upon hundreds of artists to bring their best craft to a story that we're telling together.
Can I call you Elfie?
Well, it's a little bit perky.
I know, I'm gonna call you that. And you can call me Galinda.
On a movie like Wicked or Deadpool and Wolverine, for instance, I think it's safe to say those are both of our biggest movies to date as far as complexity, scale, expectation, budget. How did you find with Wicked, where you're coming into something that pre-exists, just as I was with Deadpool and Wolverine, how did you navigate expectation and the burden or pressures of expectation, but also deliver and do your job?
Well, I've had some experience with that. Even in the Step Up series, there was a whole followers of Step Up. I did the Justin Bieber doc that I did, had a lot of Justin Bieber fans, and even G.I. Joe with a toy company and the previous G.I. Joe. So there was a sense of, oh, okay, I've been through what fans want and what you need to find for yourself. But Wicked is different because it is the first time it's on film. The first time, they didn't even shoot it on stage. I was very lucky. I was a patient zero of Wicked, so I had a very pure first experience. So part of that was protecting the things that I already loved about it. I was a huge fan. I was waiting for them to make the Wicked movie for 20 years. I was like, who's doing that? When are they doing it? I knew the areas that I remember when the bubble came in. I remember when Elphaba drops, and I remember I imagined her flying around. I actually remember it as her flying around. They're like, no, she never flew around. She was always
at
there.
the end of Act One, Defying Gravity. So you had her fly around. So you took the dream
what I
version.
Thought was happening. Yes.
Oh wow!
And it is a washy dream back then. But I absolutely knew the levers to pull in a movie, what to do there. And it was the truth of it, that really the relationship. And I knew if I found those two women, first of all, if you didn't find them, you don't make the movie.
Did you audition unknowns? As well as famous people?
Yes, we did. I thought that's the way we were going to go first. I was like, we don't need name people. But the reality is those songs are very hard. And the trick of moving in and out of those songs into reality and back and forth.
And organically
takes a professional who's probably failed at it and come back and done all the things to it. So, and they came in and they took it. But I had to sort of let go of what people hope. I didn't read the internet of what every decision I made and what they thought of those things. I had to hold on to what Wicked meant to me. And I believed enough that I knew the power of Wicked. That's why I've been watching it for 20 years to protect those things. And then I had long conversation with Stephen Schwartz and Winnie. We went through every script that was ever written about it, every line, every lyric, what different versions there were, and what he wished was there or didn't wish. And I would ask certain questions, and we put little pick points in. Dana Fox was with us as we all sort of formed what the new script would be, and that was really helpful.
Did you reclaim any stuff that was in earlier drafts of the script before the Wicked that we know went out into the world?
I think there were concepts of things. Like there's a scene where they come into the dorm room for the first time and they actually have to talk to each other. It's not a musical number
Right.
that goes into what is this feeling. And I felt that was really important. If this movie was going to be based around us rooting for this relationship and Elphaba coming, defying gravity at the end, that we had to know the reality of that relationship, and walking in and talking to each other was really important. I think they had a scene like that in the show at some point. I don't remember.
Yeah, but
exactly
the scene
what it
works in the
was,
movie
but it
for
worked in the
sure.
movie, yeah,
For sure.
For Deadpool and Wolverine, I'm sure that was enormous. That because it's not just hey Deadpool. It's like oh this whole other thing happened on top of it with the studios and everything.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that people assumed, I think I assumed, that the scale of pressure would be, oh, it's my first Marvel movie, it's an MCU movie. The MCU kind of needed a big hit. When I came into that movie, it had been a while, I mean, it had been several years since Endgame. And it was when we were prepping, I think Quantumania came out, and so I expected, oh wow, is the just kind of the pressure from the Marvel or Disney going to be intense? It wasn't. The pressure for me was I'm a huge fan of Deadpool as a character. I think those first two movies are great.
So good.
But when we got Hugh, and suddenly, I mean, I've spoken about this, so I'll tell it only briefly, but we worked for months to come up with Deadpool 3. Ryan and I and our co-writers, we did not crack it. Every idea felt either too big and bombastic for Deadpool, which is grounded and sort of raw, or too small for Marvel. And we failed. And we had scheduled a Zoom to tell Kevin Feige, you know what, let's come back to this in a year or two. And Ryan and I were going to go do another movie. And on that day, Hugh called and said, I just had an epiphany. I want to be with Deadpool. Are you guys shooting already? And he had no idea the movie was going to evaporate. And from the minute Hugh called, I knew what it would be. I knew that suddenly it's not Deadpool 3. It's really a two-hander. I wanted it to feel like Midnight Run, Planes, Trains, 48 Hours. I wanted a friendship, redemption, road trip.
Yeah.
And yes, it involves the void and a certain amount of fan service, but to me, that was the greatest gift and the greatest pressure, doing right by Logan and Deadpool in the same movie, but it is also what unlocked everything that I love most about the movie.
I love it here.
You live in a garbage dump.
I think we both know who lives in the garbage dump.
But that's what I love about it. It hit at the not just the right moment, but it was saying the most current thing. Like it was almost like, how did they know when they're making this movie that it was going to feel so today?
A lot of it was written, but I'm going to give credit where credit is due. We're shooting like a nice pool Deadpool Wolverine scene, and Ryan just starts going. And he starts speaking to the Deadpool core about, can we be done with the multiverse thing? It's not great. And then he keeps going and he starts going, it's just been miss after miss. And I'm like, I'm at the monitor going like, oh shit, I can't believe it. And the documentary that should have been made is Ryan and I screening the movie for Kevin Feige, and it's us watching Kevin, watching Deadpool say those words. But fortunately, sometimes you come along at the right time with the right story. And so Marvel just backed us and really bet on our instincts in a way that, some people call it control, but control is really trust, right? And they kind of gifted us with that trust.
Yeah, that tone is amazing that you can go. And I'm not naturally a funny person necessarily. So when I worked on Now You See Me 2, I was working with Woody and Jesse, and they're so funny.
Those fast comedic brains.
And I was in awe of it. And I really studied that, and I became sort of obsessed with how
Can I
comedy
give you
works.
a huge compliment, though? I have to tell you, the thing, as a super fan of Wicked, the thing about your movie, and I'm wondering how conscious this was, I have to think it was by design with Alice, your amazing cinematographer, who I now realize you went back to film school with.
She shot my film school musical.
I have not seen a musical adaptation employ the tools of cinema in a way that felt this additive. You used visual humor in editorial and in camera that was fucking impressive, man. The way, maybe Ariana would do a gesture and you would do these micro tilts. And I can't name another musical, maybe ever, but definitely not in my recent memory, where the language that is specifically cinematic, i.e. camera work and the meter of editing, that they added to comedy. And so while you may not think of yourself as a funny person, those comedic instincts and frankly your cinematic instincts to elevate already phenomenal source material, I found that incredibly impressive.
Thank you. I feel like I've grown in front of the industry. All
Yep.
those movies, the step-up movies, Now You See Me, I learned a lot, even working with Wernick and Reese, like
Yep.
back in the day, like I learned a lot from all those people. And I feel when I did Crazy Rich Asians, it was like I got to take all those lessons of comedy and camera and lyricism and movement and put it in this thing that actually meant very personal thing to me that I thought was scary for the world. I thought no one was gonna go see it. And when that works out and I got to play with these people, it changes the way I feel about myself, about
Yeah.
what I have to say. And so going into Wicked, it was, I feel like I hit my 10,000 hours.
Well, you and I having I think a decade on you, I'll tell you the good news is, you know, middle age is often not fun, but one of the nice aspects of this moment, our 40s, our 50s and beyond, and we've seen this with masters who came before us, is you really figure out the craft, figure out the job, and we could have a whole other conversation.
And your team, because then you get comfortable with your
yes,
team.
and the trust and the comfort of a returning team, as you have with your cinematographer, as I do with my AD, my editor, my sound designer, 10, 20 years in some cases. It really is, it allows for freedom.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, the other thing that I really felt with Asians that you found and took into Wicked is, as you've said, this ownership of, I want movies that inspire delight. And I want to take people from the real world in this dark theater among strangers, and I want to give them a feeling. I want to take them to a place that is a feeling. And I think Wicked does that. It's certainly what I tried to do in all my movies, and particularly in the museum movies and Free Guy, and now with Deadpool and Wolverine, because as we both know, a great movie, it's more than a movie memory. It becomes, if you're lucky, a life memory.
I felt the same making Wicked. Like, this is our opportunity to show why cinema should exist. I saw it with Crazy Rich Asians when people showed up, and you're like, and you change what people think about what a hero can look like or what a villain can look like, and us making fun of ourselves. And with Wicked, it was like, this is Oz. This is Wizard of Oz, one of the most iconic cinematic palettes of color, of shape, of form, and we get to go dance in it. And we get to, Wizard of Oz was always written in a time of America in transition. And cinema is so American and musical, the genre itself. And they're going to a university, so the high school genre of going to the movies is a whole thing in itself. So we took images of sort of Americana cinema and tried to tell that, because we're sort of kicking the tires on the American story. And I love that from there, like, who we think is the villain is not the villain at all.
Well,
Like,
there's
what makes us
also,
wicked,
I mean, I'm sure, novelistic length articles will be written about your casting choices. And as I told you before we even rolled, I found Ariana and Cynthia, I just was fully buying into the characters. I wasn't watching Ariana Grande do a movie performance. I was just, oh, that's Elphaba, that's Glinda. And I think it's unavoidable to name the fact and that I've not seen a person of color play Elphaba. And while that choice, again, I didn't follow along. I don't know if that choice was controversial at the time. I'm sure some people embraced it and others were shitty about it, but it did take how old is Wicked? A 20-year-old musical? Yeah. It changed its dimension. Yeah. The casting choice just kind of brought out themes that are always innate in the show, but never overtly so, and never as, I think, resonantly so.
Yeah.
And I found
Cynthia.
that really powerful.
Thank you. That's Cynthia. When she came in and she sang those words I've heard a million times, and she says, something has changed within me, something's not the same. And she starts to go into it. All the context changed. And
I have to ask about the singing.
Yes.
Because I've heard that there was live recording of the vocals on set. The singing that I'm hearing in the movie, is that a hybrid of pre-records and live? It can't possibly all have been recorded on set.
I would say it's 99% recorded on set. Now, we had both.
Yeah.
But in the end, in their mix, we leaned all the way into the live.
Were they
because-
singing with any playback in there?
Yeah, we had a live pianist every day.
But
They
they're
had-
not singing along to their own vocal pre-records?
No. Because they changed the tempo. The power of singing live was they didn't have to be on tempo. Because when she would start, did that really just happen? She could take all the breath in the world. The wind could kick up. She could feel it, and then she could go into the next phrase.
And the pianist is following her
they're
lead?
right there. It's just like playing live, and nobody on set can hear the pianist. I can because I have my headphones. But so it is like this whisper of this beautiful voice coming through, and
pure a cappella.
People would come out in tears.
Hell yeah!
It was people would applaud. It was like that's why I always say once I made a musical, like what other movie would anyone ever want to make? It is the most exhilarating, beautiful thing, and when you have people like Cynthia and Ariana, who the music, it is secondary. It is a gift from God.
Just you and I defying gravity.
Their acting is what they get to focus on, and the technical part of coming in and out is just an extension of their acting. To me, that freed everything up for me.
I have to say, it seems like a weird analogy, but the experience I had on Deadpool and Wolverine with Ryan with comedy is as music is to Cynthia and Ariana. You're watching Jordan. You're watching someone who was put here. I mean, I have goosebumps right now to watch someone do the thing that they are built so beautifully to do is a gift.
Yep.
And so for us, and I'm sure it was similar for you, the least of my worries on Deadpool and Wolverine was the funny. I knew I've done a lot of comedy, Ryan's done a lot of comedy, and together we have this now 3 movies in a row, we have this flow. But so it allowed me as a storyteller, just as I'm sure it did you, to focus on theme, character, moments of quiet, moments of drama, because they're gonna sing their asses off. I know Ryan's gonna be funnier than hell. So it's a luxury to work with just an all-star like that in their sweet spot, isn't it?
You finally wear an honest-to-God costume. Mine's red so they can't see me bleed. But I could see how yellow would be useful, too.
Have you been checked for ADHD?
What was the moment of restraint that you love? You talk about moments of silence in Deadpool and Wolverine.
I would say the one that comes to mind is in the minivan. Ryan and I there was a day we were in London. I think the strike, I forget when it was, but we were like, today we're writing this van scene. And we're gonna write a monologue for Logan, who has been in 10 other movies, but doesn't talk. Logan's a nonverbal character. How do we write Hugh Jackman a monologue that feels true to Logan, but more verbose than Logan's ever been? And so from the day we wrote that, we wanted it to be this river, this torrent of words where he just eviscerates Deadpool in the most incisive and hurtful way. And then we literally wrote a line where in the stage direction we said, silence, a flicker of regret crosses Logan's pupils, but it's gone before you even notice. And to sit in that silence and to see Hugh Jackman do exactly what we dreamed he might when we wrote it. And then to sit in the edit and in the early screenings, you did this with the dance between Elphaba and Glinda, where, man, it's a lot to ask an audience who is paying for a tentpole piece of populist entertainment. We're gonna sit in some quiet.
Yeah.
And we're gonna sit for a duration that might be unconventional and uncomfortable. But for me, that minivan scene and the silence where Logan sees that he's hurt this guy, and suddenly it's not a comedy, it's a friendship that is, kind of based in hurting each other that grows into love. Similarly, that silence where Elphaba's humiliated and Glinda goes out there, was that something, I know we're gonna run out of time, but it was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the sound of my sobs, by the way.
Yeah.
So if you hear that, that's my sniffles.
Yeah. It's interesting because I am not a writer. I don't get in there, so I can't write those in. But I kind of know the spaces that I want to play in. So I am reliant on our actors. I'm reliant on our editor, Myra Kirstein, who I've worked since Crazy Rich Asians. Alice, our DP, who, like you said, I've worked since college. Our choreographer, Chris Scott. And so we come together and this moment, if we track her emotions, this moment is, in the show, a funny moment. She comes in and does a funny dance, and the audience laughs. And the people who are gonna walk into this theater are going to want to laugh at this moment. How the heck are we gonna say, don't laugh at this moment, or let them laugh and make it uncomfortable, and we stick to our line. And I put Cynthia and Chris in a room, and I said, figure out how she moves. What is her movement? And as Cynthia started to sort of make space for herself, and they had some movements for her, but she rejected all of them. She's like, let me just find it. And it was just this odd movement. It wasn't a spell, it wasn't a thing. It's almost like she's just feeling herself out. And it wasn't about a defiant, I'm wearing this hat and that's who I am. It was almost like she surrenders to herself. She's like, this is who I am. I can't do anything about it, and I accept the shit I'm gonna take for the rest of my life. And that is just my lot in life. And yet that little space of that she's not fully complete there, that it leaves Glinda that space to come in and decide to pop her own bubble and come into it, and also strip herself of the thing that she's most powerful for, of the influence and popularity, so that she doesn't know. And so now they're down there by themselves, and that takes restraint of the camera.
Were you
takes restraint of
scared
the cuts.
going into your first test screening?
Hell yeah, the studio was like, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, because it's a lot of silence.
Everyone told us it
and
work.
so
And it's uncomfortable.
you go into that first one because you could get those titters of uncomfortable laughter.
Absolutely. I made some cuts to just remove that little beginning laughter. Because there was a moment when if you just hold a little extra longer, people are expecting a thing. So
it is amazing that
that
frames make a difference, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was 2 seconds.
Yes.
And it just made the difference. It just caught people, but people catching themselves and then seeing her eyes, and that's the power of Cynthia and Ari's eyes.
And that is the power of cinema. That's the power of what you did with that movie. I was saying earlier, you take a cinematic language and you elevated Wicked.
Thank you.
You truly did. And getting me right there with their faces and their feelings and what they're experiencing internally, which you can't really do on a stage.
You can't.
But man, can you do it on a movie screen, especially a big movie screen.
Yeah.
And I thought that was beautifully done.
Thank you.
Look at you. You're beautiful.
A couple other details that I want to find out, just for my own sake.
Okay.
How did you decide when Wolverine or Logan would hear the joke that that Deadpool was saying at any point? Like sometimes it's like the divorce line. He didn't hear it, you didn't see the reaction, it was just
I'll tell you,
existed.
no, it's a really good question.
I had that question a lot in Wicked.
So the rule on Deadpool sort of is, and I hadn't realized it watching the first 2 movies, but I remember the first day Hugh shot, he broke the fourth wall and he spoke to the camera, and Ryan, the 3 of us are good friends. Ryan was like, oh no, buddy, only Deadpool breaks the fourth wall. And this, by the way, Ryan Reynolds will give away A+ jokes. Like if someone else can land a great line, Ryan is very generous because again, he's sort of bottomless. He'll come up with 10 more. The rule tends to be if Deadpool is addressing the camera, the other characters don't notice. So the divorce joke about this is Logan, he's normally shirtless.
Yeah.
But he's let himself go since the divorce. Another line where, again, we're very conscious, Deadpool is an equal opportunity offender, but we did clear that with Hugh before we laid it out in front of the crew and the world. But so if it's to the camera, Logan does not hear it. But if it's to another character in story, then Logan does. The one exception is when Nicepool turns to the camera and says, the proposal. Deadpool, who is also a Deadpool, he clocks a fourth wall break.
That's so funny.
Yeah, weird
Those
math.
rules are things that, because it's similar with Cynthia and Ari, that Ari's in a comedy and Cynthia's in a drama, and these 2 things have to then sort of unpeel each other until they meet in the middle. And
that's a really
those were
good
a lot
point.
of things. And in the show, on stage, the audience is on the Ozian side because we come into a theater and we're already in Oz, and this green girl drops in and she's the joke. She's the witch, ha ha ha, look at the green girl. In a movie, we're like, why are they all singing? Do I accept this singing as the world? And then the green girl drops in and she's one of us, because she's like, what the hell is happening here?
Outsider
Everyone's
status.
singing. And then so we had to find that bridge, how she gets into that world, sort of reverse Elf, that she drops into that world when she sings. Did that really just happen? And suddenly you're like, oh, she has a melody, she can sing.
Yes.
And then she sings bigger and greater, and the opportunity to sing bigger and greater than everybody here was
I mean,
amazing.
I wish viewers may find this too nerdy, but that was a question because when she starts, The Wizard and I literally was like, I'm like, oh wow, I guess she doesn't have the big voice. And then verse 2, I was like, okay, wow, am I gonna love this Elphaba? Because it's kind of a little more muted than than I expected. But dude,
rips it.
again, restraint. And I assume that's something, whether conscious or not, that Cynthia and you discussed, man, we're gonna wait, and we're gonna wait. And by the time she's running towards the edge of that cliff, and it is full-throated go time, it is so compelling because of the restraint you used earlier.
Thank you. And we're planting a lot of things. You know, she's at the lowest ground, not touching the water, but right with the water. And the frogs, connection with everyone's running away from her. The nature and the animals are going towards her. These ones that can leap, and then the cricket can actually fly, and then the bees are coming towards her. And then by the time she gets to the field, the butterflies are taking off. The bluebirds are flying over the rainbow. And we give hints of her relationship with gravity, because it's also a question that we had to think about. Truly, what is her actual power? Is the broomstick pulling her, which is a weird weight thing, or is it from her that she has a relationship with gravity, which is why we show in her youth that she has a relationship with gravity, that when she cries, things happen, and even at this moment in Wizard and I, which she doesn't do in the show, that she actually shows a little bit of leap, that she has the potential to do this. She gets all the way to the edge, she's just not ready.
I like to think that's a bit of a Stranger Things Wicked crossover, by the way, when she's young and she doesn't know how to control her powers. I'm like, 11?
You never know.
11, Elphaba.
We're referencing all American iconic culture.
Well, I know.
To me,
We're
was
all
like
drawing
really
from
fun.
the same well, for sure, for sure.
But that's what I love. It's like we're at a time when we need these kind of movies that question the American fairy tale
and tell new ones.
And tell new ones.
And
even if we get to the darkness, even if it's not naive, which is what I love, that they're nuanced and they're messy.
And naivete is
uncomfortable.
different than hopeful.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Hope is courageous.
Yeah.
And I think neither of us is naive, but I know we both count ourselves lucky that we get to tell these kinds of stories that both entertain and provide hope and
I
joy.
love at the end of Deadpool that Logan says, like, so he goes, where are you going to go? And he's like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. To me, that's when I make a movie.